So last week I played a speech by a very talented actor and singer named Clifton Duncan. A lot of you guys reacted to that, and I asked him to come on the show thinking that he never would, because none of the show business people I ask come on because they're all afraid. I mean, we have a really hard time with this in making movies and getting people to come on. They're afraid of being associated with us. It'll end their career. Clifton didn't have that problem. He said he would. He's played leading roles on many of America's top stages, off-Broadway and on Broadway. He's guest starred on cable and broadcast TV, and he's now a podcaster and content creator. Clifton, thanks so much for coming on. It's really nice to meet you.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Klavan, for having me. I do appreciate it.
I have to tell you, just briefly, I saw that speech, and then I looked up your stuff and saw how good you were, and I sent it to the people here at the Daily Wire who were making entertainment content, and I said, you might want to find this out, and the guy said, yeah, we've already received this like 3 times, including from the great Gary Sinise, so a lot of people saw that speech. It must have had a big reaction.
I guess so. I would love to have Mr. Sinise on my podcast. I'm going to put that out there.
I'm sure he'd come on. Yeah.
Well, I do have to say one thing, which is funny. If a lot of actors are scared of jeopardizing their careers by talking to you, well, I don't have a career to jeopardize, so I don't have that issue.
All right. Let's talk about that. We listened to the speech, but I think it would be nice to get some details. First of all, where did you come from? How did you come up and get as far as you did in the business?
Well, I always say that my life really doesn't make sense. I mean, nobody else in my family is an actor or a performer. Nobody else has any artistic inclinations except my younger brother, who at first was an athlete, but now then he moved into music. But outside of that, I was just sort of an introverted kid who liked to draw, and I dabbled in music. I was in band for a little bit. I liked video games and pro wrestling, all these kind of nerdy activities. And then, and I was going to be an illustrator, but I'll truncate the story some, but there was a girl I liked who went into our drama class my senior year of high school. I already had this kind of idea. I liked watching shows like Martin or The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or All That, or sketch comedies like SNL back when it was funny. And so there was sort of a thing in the back of my mind of like, that looks like it might be fun, just trying to perform, but it really wasn't a serious thing for me. And then I just found I had an aptitude for it. I never had any sort of fear of being on stage. I will say that I wasn't one of those kids who, they saw a production of Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat when they were like 6, and they were like, "Oh my God, I have to do theater the rest of my life." Like, that wasn't me. My life would have been easier if that was me. But I ended up going to theater school, and I kept getting cast in plays there to the extent where they had to stop casting me. And one of the faculty told me this. They said we really wanted you to play HUD and Hair, Clifton, but we had to give someone else a chance. So then I started working in the community and professionally, and then I spent about a year in Washington, D.C. as a young actor, sleeping in my car and couch crashing, and that's when I really got exposed to just high quality professional theater, like the Shakespeare Theater, the Arena Stage down in D.C. Just wonderful, wonderful places that do amazing work. And I said, I think I'm okay, but I need to get better at this. So I put all my eggs in one basket. I went to I auditioned for NYU's graduate acting program, and like I said in the speech, it's very competitive. They audition around 1,000 people, and they call back 50, and they let in 18. And I got out in the recession in 2009, and nothing was ever easy. I worked my way up, and I gained some confidence and competence. And around 2017, things really began to break. I found myself doing productions. I did a production of, you mentioned the City Center, which I think you might be aware of. I did an all-star production of this Stephen Sondheim musical called Assassins there. And then I made my Broadway debut. And then I was doing readings and workshops with all these, A-list sort of theater people. And I was moving into television, and, things were really accelerating at a nice, wonderful clip, especially after years and years of wondering why everyone else was becoming successful except myself. And then 2020 happened, and I lived in what I now call the city formerly known as New York. And things kind of shut down. And at the beginning, I was very much on train with the COVID narrative. But then over time, I began to ask questions and really publicly oppose what was going on. And then the industry began to mandate the COVID shots, and I simply didn't want to take didn't want to take it for a variety of reasons. And so now as a result, I can't work as an actor anywhere in the United States. At a time, by the way, when they've been swept up with this anti-racism hysteria. So they're diversity hiring at a rapid pace, but I can't participate in any of it because I don't want this particular vaccine.
Because you have diverse ideas. Diverse ideas are not the diversity they're talking about usually.
Oh yeah, not at all. Not at all.
So did you have any troublesome politics, or were you not political, or where were you in terms of that?
I had learned to shut my mouth, and I say all the time, it's not as though I consider myself to be particularly conservative or right wing. It's just that I don't think that y'all are evil and that you're my enemies. And
that's already that's enough. Yeah.
I know it's enough. It's funny the conservatives that have worked their way into my lives have been the most even keeled and the kindest people, as opposed to the really neurotic secularists on the other side. But no, I would say that I was sort of quote unquote red pilled around 2014. But again, not in any sort of radical way. Then I ended up leaving the Democratic Party in around maybe 2018 or so. I just said, this party no longer reflects any of my views. And I had this epiphany actually in 2016 where I said, if you're actually a self-possessed, self-confident, happy Black person that dares not attribute all of the problems in their life to white people, the Democrats have no use for you. So that was sort of my epiphany. Like, you can't really be a happy Black person and vote Democrat. That goes against what they what they stand for.
I think you could actually leave the word Black out of that. I think.
Oh yeah.
I once heard you talked about being in Assassins, and I once heard Sondheim. I'm a big Sondheim fan. I think the guy was brilliant. But he once said, I'm proud to work in an industry that has no Republicans in it. I'm quoting them from memory. That's not exactly what he said, but basically that was what he said. How often do you meet that in the theater and in Hollywood? I mean, is that basically where people are?
It was. I'm assuming it was bad before because, like I said, I kept my mouth shut for a while, and then once Trump got elected, people's brains just completely broke, and it was the most extraordinary thing to see all these grown-ups, ostensible grown-ups, just completely lose their minds. And so you couldn't you couldn't get through. I mean, I was doing a production of it was an adaptation of Clue at Bucks County Playhouse, and Sally Struthers was in it, and it was just hilarious, and we were kind of working it out, and it was just a ridiculous comedy. But every 10 minutes we're stopping rehearsal to say, did you hear what Trump said now, or did you see this headline? And it's like, dude, I just want to rehearse this ridiculous show and do the thing. So as bad as it was before, it got even way, way, way worse once Trump was elected. And to the point where I was doing this concert, it was maybe around 2018 or so. And we were on a break. And I had learned to sort of my subterfuge was to I would make sort of milquetoast comments about Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline, which was safe to joke about back then. And this guy goes off on this rant, and at one point he goes, and then it's anti-Republican rant, and then he goes, and then there's these brain dead independents, and I'm thinking to myself, now I've just been secondhand insulted for my refusal to blindly swallow whatever the Democrats or whatever the news or whatever Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert says. That is extraordinary. And for the longest time, and I posted a Facebook rant a long time ago about this orthodoxy, this left-wing orthodoxy, and so I was sort of ahead of the curve in a few ways, but it's a really severe monoculture that just allows no dissent, and I get annoyed, if I'm being frank, by people who don't share that perspective because they've been cowed into silence. And it's like, well, that's kind of part of the problem. We need people who have a different point of view in rehearsal studios, in rehearsal rooms, on set, to provide a different perspective for a particular scene or moment that may be illuminating in a way that these other people haven't thought of, just simply due to the blind spots caused by their ideology. But there's just none of that.
So You know, one of the things I found really touching while I was watching your speech was basically your remark that you would do it again, all again. I claim, and I think I'm right, that I was I was blacklisted in Hollywood for my political views. All I know is that I was making a ton of money one day, and the next day after I started coming out, I was making zero money. And yet, I never worried about it because I'm a writer, so I can always write. I can always do what I do, and nowadays I can always find an outlet. You're not in the same position. You are an actor. You've got to have an audience. You've got to have a stage that you can play on. You have the Clifton Duncan podcast, which I didn't mention in the introduction. I should mention that. So you are creating content, but you can't do what you were trained to do. How do you make up for that? Is there a way to make up for it?
You know, it's tough, obviously, and this is a problem. You know, I've always envied singers, dancers, painters, writers, et cetera, because they can work on their own, or practice on their own, I should say. For me, I've said that if I cannot be in the industry, I need to find a way to be bigger than the industry. And I think what's really great about now is that we live in an era where if you are an artist, you have a way to organically build your own following and reach those people directly and have them financially support you. So the podcast is it's going really well right now, and the YouTube channel is growing. So what I want to do is add more performance-based content there, and hopefully down the line. So what is beginning to happen, which is heartening, is that you know, more and more artists are sort of we're seeing the same problems, and we're beginning to gather and organize and work together. So the issue, of course, being that a lot of this kind of organization for what we do in particular, whether we're putting on films or we want to stage a play, it requires a level of industriousness and conscientiousness and discipline that many artists, frankly, don't have. So I always say, you know, if I start a theater company, I would just want to focus on the acting and creative stuff and just have like some right winger run it, because that's to keep the kids in line.
Yeah. So what would you say to a kid who comes to you and says, you know, I want to be in the theater, I'm dying, and you know, and I know the kind of ambition and drive it takes to make it in the creative world. It is an incredible feeling of having a rocket in your pocket, and it's just, you can't resist it, you have to do it. What do you say to a young guy who comes to you and says, I want to do this, but my opinions are right-wing? Do you tell him to be quiet, or do you tell him to take another path?
No, I wouldn't tell him to be quiet, because the problem with that, and I began to experience this as well, is that especially as an actor, that there's so many paradoxes in terms of what we do. You know, we're living truthfully under fictional circumstances. I mean, and that in and of itself is a bit of a bit of a weird kind of oxymoron, I guess. And but the flip side of that is that if you're lying to yourself constantly in your life, then it actually makes it more difficult for you to function as an artist in your work. So you're cutting off pieces of yourself. And when I say it's an erosion of the soul. So I would say don't be quiet. And part of the problem is people are too afraid to be quiet. But if you're kicked out, I think that one of the things, again, that's great now is that we have avenues where we can build our own work. And I'm faithful that over time we'll be able to find ways to share it with other people, and that way, the blue cult, as I call them, in the city formerly known as New York and in Los Angeles, they no longer get to say that they have a monopoly on sophistication and culture and the arts. And I found, just in terms of what I've been doing, is that there is a huge audience out there of people that really want to see just great work, even classic work, just done well. I mean, one of my most watched podcasts is with Victor Davis Hanson. We're talking about the importance of Greek literature. That's amazing to me. Yeah. So there are people out there who want to see just great work, and you know, if there's a way that we can all work together and forge a new sort of movement in the American theater and the American entertainment industry, then I think that's probably a good thing. And I think it's happening slowly as you know, these other industries, these other wings of the industry are dying off because of, I mean, it's a 1-2 punch, I think, of COVID and wokeness, but it's just, I don't see anything of really any cultural significance emerging out of any of these cultures anytime soon, unfortunately.
No, I agree with you. I have to say, just to put my 2 cents in, I think the idea of adding performance to your Clifton Duncan podcast is a great idea. Clifton, it's really nice to meet you. I'm sure we're going to meet again, and I hope you start to build this thing, because I'm waiting for it to be built. A lot of us have been looking for it, and I think it's going to come from disparate places, and you're one of them. Great great to meet you and great talking to you.
Oh, likewise, Andrew. I appreciate it.
All right, I'll see you again.
All righty.
If you want that Klavan-y goodness to keep on coming, like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.